Welcome to another episode of the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. We have another, Hayden and Cyril obviously in the Zoom house, but I love saying this. We have another special guest, a friend, my boss, a person I admire and look up to, the president of MTK Global, Mr. Bob Yalen. Welcome to the Boxing Lockdown.
Pleasure, Colin. Pleasure, Hayden, Cyril. Nice to make everybody's acquaintance.
So before the other guys start talking about obviously MTK and where we're going and how the company's doing, I want to cast your mind back because a lot of people might not know this. Bob Yalen was on a plane with Cedric Krishna coming to South Africa in 1994. Kennedy McKinney, IBF world champion, was coming to do a defense, which a lot of people felt that was a mismatch. And it turns out to be the Ring Magazine upset of the year. Kennedy McKinney lost his championship to Vianney Bungu. But before all of that, you were on your plane with Cedric coming to South Africa. What was going through your mind thinking about that particular fight?
Well, honestly, it's funny. I really thought it was going to be a tough defense, only in the fact that I really paid attention to South African boxing. You know, between Bungu, Welcome Lita, you know, I knew South Africans were tough fighters and we're not just going to roll over. McKinney was like, McKinney was more relaxed and was like, okay, this guy's not going to be able to challenge me. He was very cocky. But again, as head of boxing for ABC, I wasn't in any real mood to put on easy title defenses. You want to put the guys in tough. And, you know, I really thought we only had a chance. Did I think he would beat McKinney? No, I mean, I was a very big Kennedy McKinney fan, but I did think he was in with some good talent.
Bob, you talk about being well versed in South African boxing and knowing the talent. Which of the fighters in the past have impressed you the most of South African boxers?
Well, since I've been in boxing, now you're gonna make me date myself, but I used to love paying attention to Tap Makatini, and I'm going to butcher the last name, but Nkosana, the fighter who fought Samuel Serrano, you know, Brian Mitchell, you know, Charlie Ware, all those. Since then, I've always been impressed by South African fighters, you know, and that's one of the reasons I've always paid attention to them, because they've always shown a lot of heart, and they're usually very well skilled. They're in there to win. Very rarely will you find a very good, solid South African fighter that is in over his head. You know, they're just good mechanics and well-schooled and tough fighters.
Well, in saying that, you landed, when you joined up with Colin, you landed Africa's #1 pound-for-pound fighter, Maruti and Salane, currently. I mean, how excited are you to obviously work with someone that, I mean, obviously Africa's a new market for MTK, but have #1 in Africa straight off the bat?
I couldn't be more pleased. I mean, Mthalani is just a great talent, and just another case of a terrific South African fighter who not afraid to put him with anybody. I mean, there's no flyweight in the world right now that he can't beat on any given day. I mean, especially his age, the time, you know, who he's been in with in the ring. He's a class individual, and just couldn't be happier being associated with him.
Bob, I'm going to talk more about you and your career and your journey. And I can't help but notice that you're wearing a NASA t-shirt. Now, obviously, you knowing me, that was going to come up. A lot of people don't know this. Tell the viewers about your venture working at NASA.
Well, that's the one thing my one big regret is I never was able to. I always wanted to be an astronaut. I've got a number of engineering degrees, everything else, but I always had that fun little inner ear thing, and I could never fly. I mean, I go into a merry-go-round and I get motion sickness. So of all things, great shape, never, don't drink, don't smoke, nothing. I can't do it. So I tell you, I could sit behind a computer and tell everybody else what to do. So I'm just insanely jealous of those that are able to you know, be astronauts and go to the ISS. Couldn't move from the television watching SpaceX the last couple of days. You know, but it'll probably end up being the biggest regret of my life. I drive my poor wife crazy when I tell her, if they ever offer anybody like one-way trips to Jupiter or Saturn, just so they need somebody to do it, I'm first to sign up. So.
But going on to you're talking about your career. You've worked in broadcast with ESPN, NBC, and all, and now you're in boxing management.
Right.
Which one is more exciting, boxing management or the broadcasting?
They're completely different. You know, the one thing I've always tried to pride myself on is I've always wanted to do good by the fighters. I mean, I love boxing. I could have had a very nice career as an engineer, a nuclear engineer, everything else. But I want to do well by the fighters. From the television side, you're negotiating the best fight for the least money. From the management side, you're negotiating the opposite. You want the most money for the least, the easiest fight. So it's fun being on both sides. With television, there's just a different set of headaches, but they're both just I consider myself extraordinarily lucky that I've been able to make a career out of working in boxing. I couldn't, if I can't be an astronaut, this is a pretty good close second.
What I saw is you have a fun tournament going on, the golden contract. I really like the concept of it. For the viewers out there, could you explain basically what that is?
What we did is we took 8 fighters and we made an agreement with Top Rank, ESPN, that the winner of the tournament would essentially get a golden contract. We're not talking about the A-level fighters, even though we were able to get a few, but talking about good, solid fighters who may not have been making a lot of money, but they win this tournament, they're going to be on the world stage and making good 6-figure payday. And so we got people coming in that they understand the concept. They understand I win a couple fights. I'm now in the elite of the division, making a lot of money. So they're fighting their heart out. And we've gotten great feedback.
Bob, there's a story whenever I'm in your presence, I always ask you to tell me it. The story with ESPN on the day of the fight with the late Hector Camacho. May his soul rest in peace. Great fighter. I know it's kind of embarrassing, but it's a story that I think is very funny, and it just depicts how charismatic and crazy Camacho the Macho Man was. Would you mind telling us that story again?
And it was actually with ABC.
Oh, excuse me, with ABC.
Not a problem. We were doing a fight with Hector, and we had an idea that we'll open the show with our announcer, Alex Wallow, knocking on his door, opening up the door, and just before Hector comes out, and doing a quick interview with him. Hector was all game for it, was all excited. And just before we went on air, Alex and I were talking, we're thinking to ourselves, you know what? You just don't know it. As you said, he's charismatic, but Hector was just off the wall nuts. And we were saying, you know what? Let's just be a little bit careful. So told the cameraman, do me a favor, when the door opens, push in, shoot Hector from about the chest up. Don't go any lower, because we originally do an interview, so you needed a wide shot. So just push past Alex and go right tight to Hector. No problem. Countdown, 3, 2, 1. Alex knocks on the door. Door swings open. Hector is buck naked. Thank God the cameraman just pulled in, shot him nice and tight. I now might be talking to you from the New York Sanitation Department.
Bob, now moving on to one guy who's possibly one of boxing's biggest stars today, Tyson Fury. There's talk of a possible fight between him and Anthony Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he still has a contract with Wilder for a rematch. How close are we to a Joshua Fury fight?
You know, I obviously I can't say anything that could jeopardize the fights right now. Let's just say there's a lot of conversations going on with all the people that are necessary for Wilder fights, for Joshua fights, for a number of different avenues for Tyson. You know, he's the hottest thing in boxing, and it's our job to do what's in the fighter's best interest. But saying that, he does have a contractual commitment to Deontay. So right now, that's the first avenue, but we'll see what happens.
Out of all fighters in the past, not someone that is currently signed by your management company, which fighter would you like to have worked for that obviously you couldn't have because it was from a different era? What would be your favorite fighter to represent?
Probably Muhammad Ali. I mean, it was, you know, that's just a thrill a minute, you know, and he really was, I was lucky enough to get to know him and become friendly with him, become a good friend with him. And he was in person every bit away from the cameras, every bit as magnetic and terrific as he is on camera, you know, in a different way. It was just awe-inspiring. And if I could have worked with him, it would have been tremendous. Do I think he was the greatest fighter ever? No. But all-around combination of personality, ability, everything else, I'll take Muhammad.
Bob, I'm not quite sure if you remember telling me the story. You actually told it to Lara and I when we were in New York years ago, but I want to cast your mind back to when you were at varsity. I want you to cast your mind back to when you were at varsity and you're in the dorms and there was a telephone call on the intercom. Mr. Bob Yalen, please come to the telephone. And it was Howard Cosell wanting to speak to you. A lot of people don't know this. You did a lot of script writing for Howard. The man's a genius by your own admission. What was it like in those days working with an icon of the sport of boxing?
He was just brilliant. You know, did we ever really get along? I mean, I'm not sure anybody really got along with Howard, but as a broadcaster, just absolutely brilliant. I mean, literally the first thing I ever wrote for him was about a 2-page script. I was pretty young, and I was beyond excited. I was actually writing something for Howard Cosell. He walked in, they handed him the script, walked into the booth to read it, literally glanced at the 2 pages, and boom, boom, ripped it up. Basic, who wrote this crap? This is garbage. Don't ever let him write for me again. Just roll the tape. I'll just do it on my own. I was crushed. I mean, I don't know if I was crying or not, but I was just devastated. Not only did he give my script back verbatim, he corrected the grammatical errors on the fly. It was unbelievable. The thing about him, there was never a third take with Howard. You could give him the most bizarre subject and a weird timing. If he didn't get it right on the first try, he absolutely nailed it on the second try. No, I've never seen any other broadcaster do anything to that effect. It was amazing. But then again, if he did something wrong and you happened to be sitting next to him, which unfortunately was on a bunch of occasions, Howard wasn't going to take the heat for it. You know, he blasted you. You know, you learn to take it, because it was it tantamount to being with Ali in a different way, because he was in that profession. He was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Getting back to the current crop of fighters, you have a big stable of fighters where there's a lot of young guys as well. Which one of the young fighters do you see as maybe the next guy to be a world champion, to win a world title?
Yeah, you're not putting me on the spot, but it's the type of thing, as president of the company, I really don't want to pick out individual fighters like that. It's not fair to, in my opinion, everybody can be a world champion. Everyone's going to be a world champion, especially with Colin behind him. You know, there is a lot of talent. I mean, we want to build for the future. We just think that's a smart thing to do. So we have guys that we just signed as amateurs who we think years down the road have a shot to be world champion. You know, listen, we have the Carl Framptons, we have obviously the Michael Collins. We have a great crop of guys who will be fighting for the title shortly, and we're building for guys who are going to fight for the title 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road. So hopefully when we do this again next time, you can say which of your, 27 world champions you like the most.
So Bob, what I want to do is I want to change it to sort of looking at it from a different perspective. If you're a boxer, you're an athlete, you want to get, one day you're looking at MTK and you're seeing the company is growing exponentially and you want to become a part of it. I mean, how do you approach your company, or do the company approach the boxers? How does it work?
It's a combination of the two. I mean, obviously if we see a fighter that we like that hasn't approached us and he's professional, we don't do anything untowards. We're not going to do anything illegal. We're not going to do anything not by the books. If the fighter's not under our management and we have an opportunity to speak to him and we think it's worth it, we'll approach him. Otherwise, any and every fighter is free to approach us. But again, if they are under management and we can be looked at as any type of tortious interference, we're more than happy. We'll say, thank you very much for your interest. When you're no longer associated with this management, let's talk further.
Well, a lot of people also don't know this, that you're a historian of the sport. You collect records, you go to libraries in New York City and you pick out fights and look up records. You found a lot of fights that never were on fighters' records. Your first boxing memory, the show that you went to, and I want you to remember who was the main event and the scores, because knowing you, you probably do.
Well, the good thing is I don't need the scorecard for the first fight. When I got into boxing, my dad saved up money and brought me down to Madison Square Garden for Ken Norton, Jerry Quarry, which was, and we got ringside seats. At the time, Zero Mostel was a big size. Zero Mostel was actually sitting behind us. It was just a fabulous night. And as much as I had enjoyed boxing before that, from there on, hooked. So,
And then
I hate to think how long that is ago. Oh.
Speaking about your life, you mentioned that you could have gone into engineering, had a great career. Where did boxing come in? At what point did you think I want to work in television or boxing? Where did it come in?
Well, honestly, I love this. I loved all sports. I played everything, and I just loved all sports. Boxing was my favorite. When I was in college, I got a number of engineering degrees, and I had planned on being, basically, when I came out, I was a nuclear engineer. Just being honest about it, I got bored very quickly. And ABC gave me the opportunity, because I had been consulting with ABC, supplying with records, supplying with any information he needed. Said, if an opportunity comes up, please consider me. And, at the appropriate time, they did. And I, more than happy to do it. It was ABC and ESPN. I couldn't have been happier working for companies. They were fabulous to me.
2020, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic happened. Preparations would have been either cancelled or postponed. Where did that leave you? How did you feel about the whole thing firstly, and then how have you prepared for it after it? Are you guys going forward now?
Yeah, we talk every week amongst ourselves, and we plan out, obviously a good percentage of our fights are UK based and our fighters are UK based. So we're really paying attention to any literature, anything the British board comes out with. So we're sort of beholden to them at this point, and it's looking late July, early August. So we're already talking of, looking at whether we come from one venue or a number of venues. If they're going to allow crowd, it doesn't appear they will at first. So, we're talking about how we want to function in empty arenas or small venues to start off. again, we have to make a bunch of contingency plans because nothing is set in stone at this point. But we're also looking at timing for Dubai, timing for Kazakhstan, timing for South Africa, timing for Australia. Wherever we have fighters, we want to see what the timing is so we can get them active. We want to get our fighters as active as quickly as possible.
Bob, you've seen a dramatic change in boxing over the years, particularly with social media, fighters having a voice. It's actually one of the things the company MTK obviously want the fighters to do is obviously be active on social media, pumping them, marketing themselves and so forth. How much of a voice do the fighters have now by comparison, say, before social media? Because a lot of fights are now made over bant on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. My opinion is, having grown up in the sports, fighters now have a bigger voice than ever before, and I think this is actually a good thing. I want your opinion on this.
And you're absolutely correct. If you think about it, 60s, 70s, 80s, you really didn't hear from the fighters, unless you'd see an off-time interview, or very rarely would you really hear them unless there was a major problem. Very rarely did they do, big interviews on television or wherever the case may be. There just weren't that many outlets. But as time's gone by, the internet has opened up, and it's for every athlete, avenues to speak their mind, talk trash, whatever. And people pay attention to that. Management pays attention to that. Television pays attention, or any media pays attention to it, because they look to see what draws the interest of the fans. If you get two fighters now, talking trash to each other, and you'll find it's got millions of hits, you say, "Wow, there's something I've got to pay attention to. Maybe I better make this fight." And if you see there may be two top-level fighters talking trash that nobody's paying attention to, maybe that one I'm going to put on the back burner. So it's opened up a lot of avenues, and it's opened up the way presentation and the media presents the fighters as well.
And then throughout the years, all the years that you have been in boxing, do you look back and think there was maybe 2 or 3 fights that stand out, like they were the most memorable in your time in boxing? Are there any fights that?
Other fights that I made, or other fighters?
Or fights that you may have been involved in some capacity?
Yeah, there's definitely a few that are just memorable fights. My favorite, and listen, we've been involved in, I've been involved in big fights, Tyson fights, all sorts of fights. But it's the lesser fights that maybe nothing was at stake except bragging rights. We had a fight for the WBC light heavyweight title. We had Dennis Andres and Jeff Harding, who Jeff Harding, well behind on points going to the 12th round, just sucks it up and stops Andres in the 12th round, and just an unbelievable fight. And there were fights on ESPN, Julian Letterlow and Julio Gonzalez, was just a knockdown, drag-out war that, nowadays would anybody remember it? Maybe not. But look up the fight on, YouTube. A number of Emmanuel Burton fights, obviously Mickey Ward fights. They're just when fighters show heart and skill and just fight. To me, those are the memories you take away more than the big event. I mean, obviously it's great to be involved with the big event. I don't mean to make it sound trivial or anything, but the fighters being fighters and laying it on the line, that's what you're going to take away, and that's what you're going to remember.
I want to quickly go back to social media, because there's good and bad. As you say, sometimes it builds up a nice fight. Do you go onto YouTube a lot and watch the interviews of your fighters, or do other people do that for you? Are you actively involved in that?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's the one thing. I don't profess to know everything, nor do I hope anybody else does as well. So we all try and, we have periodic, whether it be conference calls, group emails, where we say, hey, take a look at this guy. Let's see what's going on with it, with these fighters. and we all form opinions and we let everybody know. You know, so in that aspect, it's terrific. But on the other hand, every other promoter is doing the same thing. So it's not like the old days where you could get a little inside information and sneak off and go look at a guy before anybody else gets to him. Now everybody sees him almost the same time. So works in the fighter's favor.
I want you to think back over the last 20, 30 years. Who has been the biggest flop in boxing for you in terms of a fighter that you thought maybe he could have been one of the all-time greats, but just didn't do it?
Yeah, there's a couple who stand out. The one who...
How about Riddick Bowe? What's your opinion of him?
Well, pardon?
What about Riddick Bowe? What would your take be on him?
Riddick's a terrific fighter. Well, and he came along. He burnt out early. You know, he was in some real wars, everything else. But the one who I would always have loved to have seen been a world champion. He just is a great guy, just a nice person. Was Howard Davis.
Yeah.
All the skill in the world. You know, Val Barker winner. Just a great guy. Just a great person. And he just couldn't put it over the top. And I would have loved to have seen him put a championship belt around his waist. Would have loved it. You know, but just was never to be. And a tragedy that he died so young. You know.
What would you say is the biggest difference between today's fighters and the fighters of 20, 30 years ago? What would you say the biggest noticeable difference?
Size-wise, you know, obviously with the heavyweights, it's size. You know, just bigger and better. But I think it's conditioning. It's a little bit different. Now it's very scientific. Even up to about 20, 30 years ago, that's about the cusp where it's just starting to turn into, you know, they started studying, you know, muscular system. They started studying, you know, nutrition, everything else. Before that, it was basically the same boxing training they'd used for the previous, you know, 75, 80 years. And then it turned over into much more scientific thought process. You know, what muscle groups do we need to do this? What type of nutrition do we need for, you know, a 4-round fight or a 12-round fight? You know, Colin, please don't take this, you know, in any way, shape, or form wrong. I think it would have been harder for a trainer like Colin to come up 30, 40 years ago. Because he would have been a young kid, and the old school trainers would have looked at him and said, you don't know what you're talking about. It turns out he did know what he was talking about. And so now in an era where the smarter you are and the more you can use your abilities and use your knowledge to adapt fighters to training and everything else, the better off you are. And that's why Colin is such a top-notch trainer, because he's got that intellect that isn't just, all right, we got to train you for this. It's why we have to train you for this. Here's how we have to train you for this. Here's what you have to eat to accomplish this. Here's all the different things that back in the day, they just didn't feel you had to know. Nowadays, you have to know it from A to Z.
I want to go back to Tyson Fury because I still believe he is the biggest success story of last year. And not just is Tyson Fury a boxer, he's probably everyone's YouTube morning motivation as well, to seeing how he turns his life around. I mean, you watch all the videos, the motivational things that are coming out. How do you see Tyson as a person?
He's terrific. He really is. You know, listen, does everyone have off days? Everyone has off days. You know, but for the most part, he's enjoying his life. You know, people don't realize how hard he really does work. I mean, they see him because, you know, you see the YouTube videos and, you know, everything else, he's goofing around. But he works really hard to get to where, you know, to get to where he's been, and he wants to keep what he's got. You know, but he really does want to enjoy his life. You know, he realizes there's only one go around, so I'm going to live it the right way. And he's learned some lessons along the way. Obviously, we know he's had some ups and downs. But the key is he learned a lesson. And he's just a great person to be around.
This is a question that I like, and please don't be offended, Bob, by me asking you this question. I like asking the guys who've been in the sport a long time, the veteran kind of guys. But they also have to understand that they, in the new school and the new way of thinking, what era do you prefer? Did you prefer the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, or this era? If you had to choose one, which would you choose and why?
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, listen, 70s I love because that's when I got into it and it was new and exciting. 80s when I really got into ABC and television and everything else, so brought a whole new perspective on things. 90s was the great onset of things. I would love to say every era has brought something new and exciting, and it has. And this is a great new era, is the challenge with MTK, being on the other side of the coin. So I'm gonna beg off that question because it's I really wouldn't have a favorite. I really wouldn't. Like I said, and it honestly does come back to boxing. When boxing's in your blood, it's just with you all the time. And I love the sport. I love the people in the sport. I love the fighters. I love everything about it. And so I can't say there's any favorite. It's been since day one. It's been great.
Speaking of the different eras, we've seen obviously the previous eras, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. There seem to be more interest in the sport from your so-called casual fans.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think has changed now? The interest is not as big.
Well, boxing has always been a cyclical sport when it comes to interest. If you look at it, 50s, 60s, when it's ridden waves, and now with you could say with some people it's some segments it's a lot more popular. Other segments it's lost interest because our culture now is very much a very rapid fire culture. So they want their information, they want their action very quickly over and done with. To appreciate boxing, you need to give it you need to think about it. It's going to be a 12-round fight. But again, you also, in down periods, you were also looking at, there was usually somebody on the horizon. And nowadays, like with the internet, you can see a lot of different fighters on the horizon. So there may be less fans overall because there's such a dilution of interest because there's so many different sports and so many different avenues to see them. But the ardent fans are very, very passionate and very, very, stick to the boxing and will watch. My son-in-law loves boxing, and not just because of my son-in-law, even though I'm not sure would have let my daughter marry him anyway, but he loves boxing. He loves boxing. He'll watch boxing that I won't even watch because he loves the sport so much. And it's because he can watch it, whether it be YouTube, whether it be wherever, old fights, new fights. There's a lot of avenues where he can watch it, and he's learned to appreciate it. And it's how it is with a lot of people now. You can compare the old and the new, as you said earlier, the different eras. You can look at what do the fighters look like in the 70s, what do the fighters look like in the 90s, what do the fighters look like in the 50s, even going back even further. So it's brought a new dimension that didn't previously exist. So again, as popular as it used to be, maybe not, but in different ways and shapes, it's more interesting because you can make the comparisons. You can still see the old fighters, and you can make dream matchups and any number of different things.
Yeah, so one thing that's a bit of a tricky question, I guess, because we were just talking about in the previous question now asked was basically building up boxing and making sure people come in to watch. The YouTubers that fought, KSI versus Logan Paul, the reason I say it's tricky is because, yes, it brought in a whole bunch of casual fans watching, but what's your opinion on fights like that being made?
Tricky question for me in my position. Listen, I'm happy with anything that brings eyes to the sport, as long as there's legitimacy to the event. If it was a complete laughingstock, or if it was something that made fun of the sport or made light of the sport, or something, if a tragedy happened, yeah, I'd have a big problem with it. Would I go out of the way to watch it? Maybe not. But again, it brought new eyes to the sport. So in a large context, I'm okay with it.
Bob Yalen's favorite fighter.
Colin
And why? I'm not a fighter. I'm one of the trainers.
No. Honestly, favorite fighter or that I've seen or been associated with of all time.
No, you've seen that you've been associated with.
There's a bunch of guys. I mean, it really is. I love dealing with Jeff Fennick. I love Jeff Harding, the two Australians. They're just great to be around. I respect anybody who gets into a boxing ring. I mean, if you have the wherewithal, if you have the guts, people, that's what I'll never boo at a boxing match, no matter how bad the fight is. If you're able to put on boxing gloves and get into a boxing ring with somebody across, 16, 18, 20 feet away from you, who is coming out to try and knock you out. If you have that fortitude to do that, you have my respect and my admiration, no matter how bad things may be, how bad the fight may be, how bad the event may be, whatever. Okay? That's why it's really hard, and I'm not trying to be evasive. I just love working with fighters. James Toney, just a great guy. All these, Sugar Ray Leonard, all these guys that I've worked with, I've been honored to work with them. It's not even having favorites. It's having the honor of being able to work with these fighters. Tyson, I knew these guys when they were amateurs, and I had a chance to spar with a lot of them, and it's just I can't name a favorite because I just won't name a favorite. That's about as evasive as I can get.
Going back to Tyson Fury, he went into pro wrestling, I think it was last year. How did that come about?
He's a showman. I mean, he loves being out there. I mean, he's really willing to do almost anything. He really just loves being in front of the public, and WWE is, they've got ideas. UFC, they've all got ideas on how to best, I hate to use the word exploit his talents, but make the best use of his personality, his physical abilities. I mean, you may look at Tyson and big upper body and long thin legs and say, what kind of athlete is that? Believe me, he's a hell of an athlete. And he's just got the right attitude and public persona that he would do great in any sport that'd be lucky enough to have him.
Bob, firstly, are you a big reader?
Oh yeah.
Which
it's about 300 books right there.
Okay, well, if you couldn't choose a favorite boxer, could you maybe choose a favorite book?
Fortunately, I read science fiction, so you probably goes with the old engineering and my science background. Boxing book, I love boxing. I love boxing biographies. The books that have been written on, some great books on, obviously, on Ali, Marciano. Christian Franzen's written some great autobiographies like Duran and Arguello, a few other guys. I just love reading, boxing biographies and science fiction. Not quite what you'd a direct correlation, but those are what I enjoy.
Bob, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Your last parting shot for the South African boxing public that are going to be watching the show.
I'm going to tell you a story that maybe one of the most impactful on my entire career. And it's not direct, it has nothing to do really with boxing, but it's because of your audience and where you are. I was to be one of the producers and associate producers of the World Cup. And I came to South Africa many years ago to do a story on football in South Africa. And I wanted to go visit Jake Malala over in Soweto. And the camera crew said, no, you can't go over there. You can't go over there. It's just a bad idea. And I got very lucky growing up, and my parents raised me to be completely colorblind. So I hope everybody ends up. And I said, no, I want to go see Jake Malala. I'm not worried about it. I know it may be a bad idea, but it's what I want. It's what I want to do. And at the same time, we'll bring, if we get lucky enough and there's something going on with football, great, we'll capture it. They finally agree to bring me over. We drive into Soweto, and we come across a bunch of kids playing football in the field. Tell the camera, let's go, take the cameras, let's go film them. They reluctantly come out of the van, and we start shooting the kids playing. We're there for about 10, 15 minutes, and all of a sudden we look around and we're surrounded by people. And the cameramen were like, we can't do anything to protect you. We told you not to come here. We can't do anything to protect you. Well, it is what it is, and what happens, happens. Older woman came out of the crowd and walked over to me. Yeah. So I get a little, when I remember this. And she came up to me and she goes, "Bless you, my son." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." She goes, "Bless you, because you came into the den of the lion not to slay him, but to befriend him." And it had such an impact on me. And she said, "Are you afraid?" I said, "No, not at all." And she said, please come back here for dinner tonight. Would you do that?" And I said, "I'd be honored to." And they came back that night and had just the most wonderful time. But the fact that she would put herself out like that in an era, and we're going back many years, and in an era that it was probably dangerous for both of us to do, but she took the initiative, and the way she put it, that's something I'll take to my grave. And so I still get a little shook up when I think about it. It was just beautiful. It was as beautiful as experience as I've ever had in sports, in television, anywhere.
Wow, it's a very special story, especially what's been going on in the world, specifically in America, as we've all been seeing, and the world's been standing up and taking notice of. That's Bob Yalen, the president of MTK Global. Thanks for watching. This has been the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. We will see you again soon.